Good evening and welcome to a special meeting of the Grafton Planning Board. Today is Friday, May 5th at 7 p.m. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this meeting of the Grafton Planning Board is being conducted with both in-person and remote participation by board members and members of the public. Remote participation by the public for the public hearings and any other matter for which the board allows public participation will be via the Zoom raise hand feature. If you raise your hand on Zoom, you will be enabled at an appropriate point to enter the meeting via voice or video to make a comment or ask a question. In all cases, whether in person or remote, please identify yourself by name and address for the record. Every vote tonight will be taken by roll call. Please note that this meeting is being recorded as well as being broadcast live on the Grafton Community Television Government Channel. I'll begin with a roll call of the board. Mr. Robbins?
Present.
Mr. Hassinger?
I'm here.
Ms. Hassinger?
Here.
Mr. Venkatraman?
Here.
And I am here, and also present in the room is staff and Talia Alward.
Here.
All right, and before we get going, I just want to acknowledge this is Linda Hassinger's last evening as a member of the planning board. I want to thank her for her years of service and wish her well going forward.
Thank you.
I'll add my thanks to that. Appreciate the value she's brought to the board over the years. I kind of regret seeing her leave.
Well, it's been 9 years, and it's time for someone new to come on. But also, it hasn't been a good year for me, so I got to step back.
Yeah. I appreciate anybody's decision to step back when it's time, when they feel it's time for them. But no,
Justin, if I may, I would like to thank Linda too. It's been a short but a sweet partnership working with her pre-pandemic and during pandemic, and it's been great. Thank you.
It's been 6 years.
I know. You're sitting next to a guy who has been probably here for 36 years, right? So I'm saying in comparison.
Oh, well.
All right, so our first agenda item is a public hearing scheduled for 7 p.m. Mr. Robbins, I believe we have a legal notice.
We have a legal notice, which says, and I quote, "Pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 5, the Grafton Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Friday, May 5th, 2023, commencing at 7 o'clock p.m. in Conference Room A at the Grafton Memorial Municipal Center, 30 Providence Road, Grafton, Mass. The purpose of the public hearing is to provide interested parties the opportunity to comment on proposed amendments to the Grafton zoning bylaw, which have been submitted to the 2023 Spring Annual Town Meeting warrant as follows. Amend Section 4.2 entitled Off-Street Parking and Loading to exclude structures and uses within the Grafton Common Historic District from off-street parking requirements and to modify the units of measure in the off-street parking schedule. Amend Section 12.7.4 entitled Shared Parking and Section 12.7.6 entitled Off-Street Parking Schedule to revise parking requirements in the Village Mixed-Use Zoning District. Amend Section 3.3.3 entitled Special Cases to define requirements for 2 or more principal structures erected on the same lot. Amend Section 12.6 entitled Development Types to update the numbering for the Village Mixed-Use District. Amend Section 3.2.3.1 entitled Use Regulation Schedule for the purpose of allowing via special permit and site plan review from the Grafton Planning Board an accessory use to a primary agricultural use, seasonal outdoor eating and drinking establishments including banquet facilities, alcohol sales, and live entertainment. Add a new Section 5.12, Accessory Uses in Agricultural and Residential Districts for Seasonal Outdoor Eating and Drinking Establishments, including banquet facilities, alcohol sales, and live entertainment to outline requirements. Amend Section 1.5.5 to add an additional condition for accessory uses. A complete copy of the text of the proposed amendments to the Grafton zoning bylaw is on file with the town clerk and the planning board office in the Grafton Municipal Center and is available for inspection during normal business hours. Individuals requiring special accommodation at the public hearing should contact the planning board office at 508-839-5335, extension 1400. End quote.
All right.
Wait.
Let's do these, I want to say one at a time. There's currently nobody in the room from the public nor on Zoom for public participation. But we can still give the board, and if anyone pops in, chance to comment. The first warrant article item is amended section 4.2 entitled Off-Street Parking and Loading. Should we share this, Dave, you think?
Yeah. Put it on the screen for what it's worth, if I can find that. There we go.
All right. So, as we had previously discussed, this is primarily to let me pull the right sheet of my hard copy. So,
Yeah, this basically, just,
it's
yeah.
it's primarily for consistency, where we are both exempting the parking from the Grafton Common Historic District, because pretty much any parking that is in that district would be pre-existing at this point, as our expectations. So this is to exempt it for for any uses coming before us for that, so we don't have to worry about the parking requirements there, and to align with the for the off-street parking schedule, to align with elsewhere in the bylaws, and a slight change.
Yeah, what we're doing here, aside from the Grafton Common Historic District, we are adding a schedule for multifamily dwellings in the Village Mixed Use District to differentiate between the parking requirements for studio and one-bedroom apartments versus 2 or 3 bedroom apartments. And this is to do a little bit better job of accommodating visitor parking in the Village Mixed Use District, where we had a case where the requirement of 1.5, I think it was, per unit didn't really produce adequate parking. And in addition, we are clarifying and eliminating an ambiguity for industrial use, whereas industrial use occurred under 2 different rows here. So we're eliminating one of those references. We're separating a warehouse from industrial, and in all cases we're basically changing the unit of measure to a consistent 1 parking space per 700 square feet of floor area.
All right. Does any member of the board or any member of the public have any comments or concerns with this warrant article as proposed for the changes?
We do have one attendee
Yep.
on Zoom now.
Yes. You just joined it. That attendee,
Mhm.
Bill Rychik, which I believe we have a comment on file from him as well for the warrant article.
Bill.
Rychik, I don't. Rychik.
Ricklick?
Thank you.
I'm not-
I knew I was
I'm
pronouncing
not
it wrong.
quite sure of the correct pronunciation, and I apologize if I mangle it. But let's see here.
All right, I'm seeing no person wishing to speak on this article. I think we'll just move on, and then we can vote when we do the report.
Yeah. So,
The next one is amend 12.7.4 entitled Share Parking in sections 12.7.6 for off-street parking schedule.
okay, and here, what do we have? Here we've done 2 things. Section 12.7.4 on shared parking was discovered to be word for word identical to section 4.2.5.3. So instead of repeating the words here, we're simply referring to the other section.
Yes.
And here's where this links back to what we just talked about on the parking requirements, where formerly the multifamily dwelling schedule here was 1 space per unit for studio and 1 bedroom, 1.5 for 2 bedrooms, and 2 for 3 or more bedrooms. We're replacing that now with the reference back to the table we just talked about, which is 1.25 for studio and 1, and 2.25 for 2 and 3.
Yep. Would any board member or member of the public wish to speak on this article? I'm seeing none.
All right.
That brings us to 3.3.3.
And here we've just clarified the rules when you have 2 or more principal structures on one lot. As it was written before, it wasn't quite clear that you basically add up the requirements for the individual structures. That was just clear.
Yeah, this was very clerical and not, I don't think there's any substance that needs to be discussed, but should anyone wish to, I'll give the opportunity now. And I'm seeing none. That brings us to the next one, which is 12.6 development types.
And this one, the sum total of the change here is eliminating a duplicate number. Yeah, there were 2 12.6.2s, and we're changing one of them to 12.6.3.
And just like the last article, this is very clerical, and I do not anticipate anyone to have a comment, but I'll give the opportunity now. And I am seeing none. And that brings us to 3.2.3.1, the use regulation schedule.
And these two kind of go together.
Yes.
So, although they're listed separately on the agenda,
I just noticed that too, and I realized it is.
but, I mean, this is adding an allowable accessory use to an existing agricultural use that is normally exempt. I mean, the agriculture use is exempt from zoning.
Yep.
There's a Mass General Law reference that I don't remember off the top of my head, but
Yeah.
basically what we're adding here is an accessory use, which is not allowed by right as agriculture, but it's an accessory to agriculture that is allowed by right. It's an accessory use, as stated, for seasonal outdoor eating and drinking establishments, including banquet facilities, alcohol sales, and live entertainment. Let me highlight here. That relate to the operations of the principal agricultural use in an amount of no more than 10% of the total agricultural acreage, limited to an agricultural property that is 20 or more acres, and with a restriction on allowance of noise. That's all written into the definition here. Important to note that this is allowed by special permit, which means the planning board gets to review the proposed use and decide based upon the various criteria, including the ones listed down below, as to whether it is to be allowed to, I think, answer some of the questions that have been submitted in writing and have otherwise come up. As a special permit use, sign in. Yeah, as a special permit use, the planning board has a variety of criteria that it has to evaluate. And the planning board has the authority to set conditions, including things like hours of operation and probably other things that,
Yeah, I think we could set some conditions relating to, adequacy of noise mitigations as well.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, so the planning board, the planning board will be able to set a variety of conditions. It's important to understand that as a special permit, there is a process that has to be followed, including public hearings, which have to be advertised in advance, and following the close of the public hearing, at which the planning board takes public input and considers all relevant factors, a decision is issued either to approve or deny. And after the planning board issues a decision under this, there is then a 20-day appeal period. So whichever way the decision goes, if someone doesn't like it, they can appeal the decision, and it is appealed generally, I think, to Superior or District Court. But there is a whole review process. It's not just something that happens one night and we're done with it.
And I mean,
So-
I think there's already been emails saying, what's the next step they could take if, so it's.
Who is that? They need to identify themselves.
please just say your name and address for the record.
Oh, Tyler Holden.
Thank you. But yeah, the
Yep.
the bottom line is that the planning board will review it. That will go through the normal planning special permit process. When you come with a, assuming it passes, if you come with an application for it, and that whole process is we will have a chance for public comments, and we can go from there as well.
Yep.
One other thing I want to say before I open it up more wide is, I know when we first were voting to put this on the warrant, there was a comment about the acreage amount, and preliminarily, I did not get a final read from Fiona before today on if this was confirmed one way or the other, but town council had preliminarily said that her opinion was that changing this at town meeting floor to be a lower acreage requirement from 20 down to like 5 may not be something that is acceptable, because it is a much bigger change, considering it'd be a lot more parcels that it applies to. That that said, so my based on that conversation I heard, I would for myself not I would lean to leaving it at 20 for town meeting, and then if a member of the public or anyone in particular wants to lower that, they could either do it through sales petition or come before us, and we can discuss and possibly do even for fall town meeting, as a separate article to lower this requirement more.
Yeah, as I recall the board's discussion from when we were discussing putting this on the warrant, we, I think, weren't really strongly tied to the 20-acre requirement. Specifically, I think our discussion indicated that there would be some flexibility. The question of whether a lower number would be acceptable at town meeting is largely up to the discretion of the moderator to decide whether the moderator feels it's within the scope
Right.
of the organ. And the moderator is the ultimate authority as to what is in line. I think consistent with what council was suggesting, the board probably in their report would leave it at 20, but an amendment could be offered on town meeting floor, and it would be up to the moderator to decide whether to allow it.
On
Yeah, we talked about that before, and I think, at least certainly my feeling, and I think the members were more or less along with me, that the best thing to do here is to do the 20 acres, get started, see how let everybody see how that goes, and it can always be amended at a future meeting, as you say. If there's anybody who doesn't understand special permits, just extending what Dave said a little bit, they're essentially discretionary. There's no assurance that you can get an approval, no matter what the conditions. We have to come to a
Consensus.
we have to get 4 out of 5 who agree on granting the special permit with whatever conditions to come up with. So it's a fairly conservative step to try to help a situation that we've heard from a good many people is desired. I'll note that we did have, just for the record, we did have a comment on this at our last meeting from a citizen, and we do have some written input on our record also.
Yeah, Prabhu's hand is
Yes,
up.
I was about to recognize him. Go ahead, Prabhu.
Thank you. So I happen to have conversations with some of the folks, at least one of them who is an aborter. They had two questions. I just wanted to table it and help. The planning board can help clarify. One of them was, is there a duration set for the special permit? Is it annual? Is it going to be renewed? And the second one, how do we monitor? Was the question that are the residents supposed to have decibel meters or whatnot to monitor it? I didn't want to give out an exact response about my opinion. I said I'll bring it back to the planning board. We'll talk about it. It'll be here. We can talk about that.
Yep. So
Yeah,
ultimately, the planning board could set a duration on a special permit on typical fashion. We have not done that for we issue a special permit and assuming the conditions are met. That's just going forward that it's granted with those conditions. As far as monitoring goes, any citizen could independently without doing trespassing, so to speak, could give their own input and observations, but that would ultimately be up to the zoning enforcement officer. So any concerns that something is not going right would have to be reported to the zoning enforcement officer, and then he would be the ultimate authority on with the planning board planning the town planner with their town planner's assistance as well, just to get the sense on is are things being followed according to the special permit and the zoning laws as well. So ultimately it's up to them to decide. Certainly if a butter or someone else sees something's not going right according to the special permit that is granted or to their understanding of the special permit that's granted, they could take documentation, video, pictures, whatever, and send that off to the zoning enforcement officer.
yeah, the actual steps are to complain to the zoning officer. He's required to consider them and decide what to do about them. There's a time frame. Whatever he does or fails to do can go to the zoning board of appeals as a next step also. So there's a pretty good mechanism in place for that.
Yes, and the board can include in the conditions to the special permit, any conditions that the board feels are important to ensure compliance and to ensure that all the the neighborhood considerations are taken into account.
Yeah.
We can't obviously speak now to what the permit might be because we do not have first of all, the zoning bylaw hasn't been approved yet, but if it is, then the board is not going to make any commitments to what it might rule until we actually have a permit application in front of us.
Yeah, and after we've heard input from anyone and everyone who's concerned.
Right.
Yep.
Now, with that being said, if there's rules we have to follow and the zoning officer does come out, he checks everything, we're within where we're supposed to be. I mean, how many times is the said neighbor allowed to complain before the findings, if they keep coming back, okay, they're not over on the decibel, they're not, going past this hour, or can they just keep doing that?
I don't have a concrete answer on that. I think ultimately, that'd be something that the zoning enforcement officer or staff here could say. I don't imagine there's a limit to the amount of time someone can say there's an issue. There's probably some discretion on how frequently he would, respond to those, but there's a timeline he does need to, look at, but.
Yeah, the board cannot dictate to the public limits on the public's ability to bring an issue to the attention of the zoning enforcement officer. The zoning enforcement officer, as the one who has to field such inquiries,
It takes action.
will field those inquiries in a way that the zoning enforcement officer feels is the most appropriate. That's really up to, yeah. I don't know that, I'm not aware of a situation where the zoning enforcement officer has had to deal with an excessive number of complaints or unfounded complaints. But that's really that's his bailiwick. The board here issues the permit with the conditions, the zoning enforcement officer. And as a practical matter, the zoning enforcement officer generally relies, not speaking to this specific case, but just in general, the zoning enforcement officer relies on the public to bring potential violations to his attention. If the town had the resources to do so, the town could have something like an inspection team that goes out and makes weekly inspections for compliance with all permits. But
Yeah, but we can do that right after we take on a dog catcher to run around town looking for dogs that aren't penned up.
yeah, so this isn't the only situation in which questions of compliance and enforcement come up. Most of the time, people do comply with their permits without any issue. But when they don't, unless the zoning enforcement officer is made aware of it or becomes aware of it, there's not likely to be any action. But
Right.
I suspect if a permit should be issued for what we're talking about tonight, pretty close attention will be paid.
Oh, 100%.
All right. Does any member of the board have anything further to comment or say on this at this time?
Well, I did note that I think the finance committee recommended this, and their summary is fairly short and I thought pretty good about what it is, what it does, and why.
All right. And I would like to give the public a chance to get promoted to Zoom and speak on it. If any member of the public is, wants to raise their hand to speak, I will allow that.
Yes, I do not see any attendee raising a hand asking to speak.
I agree. So, all right. I think the board will move on and we'll take up a vote on our report for town meeting in a short bit.
Right, so, let's see.
The next was 1.5.5, which I think was just covered. But I want to double check.
Yeah, no, we haven't.
Oh, thank you.
We did cover we didn't speak specifically to it, but the 5.12 amendments were part and parcel of this,
Yep.
which I think we've effectively covered. 1.5.5, just for the sake of completeness. Oh, the link. The link on the website doesn't point to that.
No, it's on the same page. You scroll down to the second page
Oh, there it is.
on what you already had. I just went through all that, trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I didn't scroll. So let me bring that back on the screen just for the sake of completeness here.
Yeah, above the fold. Remember, above the fold.
Yes. We've had some conversations along those lines, Bob, in another context.
Yeah, the IT committee, man.
Yeah, so what did we do? We added K to this?
It's not marked clearly. There's no green there.
Yeah, let me just double check here.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8.
Yeah, we added K to this.
And I think this is
Yes,
a good addition, kind of a clarification that.
it is. That's
And this does relate to the topic we've just been discussing.
It's consistent with the criteria that at least I have been thinking about whenever I've approved a special permit as well, but it's still
Yeah.
good to have.
I think it helps. G, is where we've looked at a lot of that, in the past, but I've never been totally happy with the way G is stated, so adding K, does, I think, help us,
Yeah, I think,
give us more guidance.
right.
I'll notice that as well as other conditions and other sections of the law, these are the primary ones that we're required to make findings on for a special permit. And in general, they say we have to make a finding that each of them is okay. So I've always looked at it as the burden of proof is on the applicant, to give us what we need in order to make that approval. It's not in some processes, you have to prove that it's wrong before you can say no. But here, I think you have to prove that it's okay.
All right, so I'll give any member of the board or public a chance to speak to this particular addition. And I'm not seeing anyone to do so. All right. Do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
I have a motion to have a second.
Second.
A motion and a second to close the public hearing. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Mr. Robbins.
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger.
I
Mr. Venkataraman.
Aye.
And I vote aye. I declare our public hearing closed. Now that brings us to our action item on approving the planning board report.
Thank you for all the attendees.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Hmm?
Alright.
All right, so now we have we have a draft planning board report in front of us.
Do you make
Hi,
votes
Ross.
on to recommend each of these first?
So, yeah. So we should probably
Let's see, there's
do a-
one place here,
1 second.
under the last,
Yep, Bob, 1
Oh.
second. We should probably have a formal vote to recommend these warrant articles, either individually voted or even as a whole, whichever the board wishes, before we
yeah,
do the,
well, we can, vote to approve the draft report with positive, findings, and note that, under
It-
these
it would probably
one
be cleaner. Just to,
or,
it would
what's
probably,
that?
I think it'd be a lot cleaner for staff and the minutes to have us vote to formally recommend the articles as they were before we do the actual report.
Oh,
The report usually
Yeah.
follows
Yeah,
that.
because
that's
the
the
report
okay,
the
okay,
report usually follows our
so-
our.
so moved.
Second.
All right.
Understanding that the motion is to recommend all of these warrant articles,
All right.
or all
And-
of these zoning amendments, whatever language you care to use. Right, Bob?
Actually, as I think about it, all we're required to do is to file a report. So all we have to do is approve a report, which happens to say that we, recommend.
we
think it
previously voted to recommend and then voted to approve a report. So,
It's been moved.
all right. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Robbins,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger,
I
Mr. Venkataraman,
Aye.
and I vote aye. I declare the motion carried unanimously. All right. Now, you said you had a comment on the report? Rob?
Yeah, just on on the one we just did, 3.2.3.1 and, 1.5.5. We should change no public comment on the article was received to reflect the, that we did receive input. in whatever way you want to say it.
Yep,
Yeah, that's why it's highlighted, so we can,
that sounds. Oh, good.
And I'll move that we do the approval in that way.
So the motion is to approve the entire report,
With positives.
with positive recommendations and correcting the statement that no public comment was received on what we just talked about.
Not correcting, it's updating.
Yes.
Since it was drafted,
Yes,
we put,
yes, reflecting the report will reflect that public comment was received.
So I have a motion. Did I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Robbins,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
aye.
Ms. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman,
Aye.
and I vote aye. I declare the motion carried unanimously. All right. So our next discussion item is preparation for town meeting. So one of us has to read these reports.
That's you.
Yes, that's typically me. I don't
Traditionally the chair.
traditionally the chair. I can certainly do that. I don't mind if someone else wanted to, but I'll happily do it.
I am not going to volunteer.
Sounds fine to me.
You know.
Okay.
And when I joined the board, they used to pick out a member. I think probably one that was in favor of each thing that they were reporting on to be the one who read the report for that item. But that's been gone for about 30 years. And usually the chair just gets to get or whoever the senior member is present gets to do it.
All right. Is there anything else the board wants to talk about for town meeting preparation? Do you have a comment, Natalia?
I think some of the discussion was regarding if anybody wanted to volunteer to answer any questions of the public, if somebody wanted to be the focal point.
Yeah, that's a good point there. There may well, with at least one of these warrant articles, there may well be discussion on town meeting floor, questions that need to be answered.
Yeah, per the charter, we have to have someone there to respond to questions. Customarily, we start with the chair. If he's present, then he's filling that role. He can, I suppose, ask other members of the board if he wishes.
Yeah,
Yep.
I will certainly be there. I do not have as much ingrained knowledge on some of these pieces as like yourself or Mr. Robbins here, so I would happily defer that to someone else if one of you wish to take that up.
I will be present at town meeting for any number of reasons, wearing two or three different hats for my presence at town meeting. But yes, I would be willing to help answer questions should they come up.
That'd be helpful. Thank you.
Well, I could too, but of course, Fiona may also be the one. You have to decide. You have to see what question you get,
Yeah.
Yeah.
She wanted
and
to,
then
if anybody
conclude
else wanted to take the lead.
how to answer it.
I think, we'll be there in person. If there's a question that Fiona feels well suited to answer, I think we can certainly let her as staff answer the questions. But that's my take. But if someone wants to hear, especially from the planning board, which sometimes they do,
Yep.
we can certainly, fill that in. All right. Any further comments or
There's
things
still a
for
couple of
town meeting?
items.
Guess not. That brings us to just a few minor pieces. Bills.
Move we approve the bills that have been submitted.
Second,
All right. I have a motion and a second to approve the bills. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Robbins.
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger.
aye.
Ms. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
And I vote aye. I declare the bills will be paid. We do have minutes from previous meeting that was sent out earlier today, I believe.
Yep. And I would move that we approve the minutes of April 24th, identifying the mysterious Mr. Roberts as Mr. Robbins.
He snuck in there. I saw him. Little guy. Really little.
My last name has been pronounced many different ways. Roberts is not uncommon. Robinson is not uncommon. The weirdest one is Rabbids.
Alright, so I have a motion to approve the minutes with the changes mentioned. Do I have a second?
Second,
Alright, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
if I may jump in
Go
quickly.
ahead.
Dave, at least they get your last name in some shape or form. Come to my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My-
You really have the problem. We have it a little bit. But
yeah.
Yeah, and my maiden name got slaughtered because it's Czech. And
at least they spelled it in Roman characters, not
well,
not
Czechs don't
Cyrillic.
use Cyrillic.
Anyway, any further discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Robbins,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman,
I
and I vote aye. Okay, the motion carried unanimously. Any other item which may correspondence? Anyone have anything in correspondence they wanted to call out tonight?
Well, it was the letter that we saw.
Yeah, we spoke of the letters, the communications
Yep.
that were received on the what we just talked about.
Okay, Bob wants me to do this last time. Move to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
second,
This is non-debatable. Mr. Robbins,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman,
I.
and I vote aye. I declare us adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Linda.
You know,
Thank you.
Linda.
It's really been great, and you're a really good board, and I want to see it continue to be this solid.
I think we do too.
We'll carry on as best we can without you, Linda.